Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, April 5th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about President Biden's polling averages and the improvements we have been seeing him get over the past 45 days on the national average and in key battleground states, and what that means for Democrats as they go right into the general election season as the summer rapidly approaches. Now, the race to the White House, race to the WH.com is an amazing website. You can have, so many different features here, and I think everything that they add have been very, very helpful at just overall understanding the electoral trends, overall understanding just how this race has shifted from where it was a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And so I think looking at it for one has been super, super great, right? And so this is not at all like some type of paid advertisement, but what it is to say that you should check it out yourself because you can probably draw some very similar or maybe different conclusions based on the data that we are also looking at. I'm presenting it to you here, and in an effort to be transparent about it, that is the website that I am using. And I would encourage you to try out this new feature here because it is the basis nearly entirely for this video. Now, they added this feature exploring how polling has shifted in the last 45 days, and I actually think it shows a consistent trend here, a trend line that is very positive for President Biden that might actually see some type of continuation into the general election season. We've been pretty much caught up in primary season for the past couple of months. Only recently, around a month ago, did Joe Biden and Donald Trump really get to the point where they had overall won, the necessary amount of delegates needed. They had overall won, the media narrative that the primary was practically over. There's no more coverage of Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson or Nikki Haley, and really you saw that die down. And so the American public immediately went into a point where now it's Trump versus Biden again. And so we're starting to see some differences in polling from a month ago or a month and a half ago versus today, largely because of that perception. Now, the real catalyst for this as well wasn't just the new feature added. I think it came at a great time, but there was actually a Twitter account here that compiled some recent polls on the national level that I genuinely did not realize were ones that I found to be very, very, credible and interesting. That when put together, you actually found that there were far more Biden polls out there than what you otherwise might expect. The Real Clear Politics average here has shown a very, very little shift. Over the past 3 months, it has been relatively the same for President Trump, and this is probably around the low point in terms of his leads over the past couple of weeks. But that isn't to say that we've ever seen President Biden lead on the generic ballot, or I guess the general election head-to-head matchup here, in months, because we haven't. President Biden hasn't really been in a super powerful position when it comes down to polling, and you can see going all the way back, let's see, the last time Biden was in the lead was in September of 2023. Now, I don't believe that. I do believe that at different points in time over the past 6 months, President Biden absolutely had the upper hand over Donald Trump. Do I think that the polling data did get that incorrect? Absolutely. I look back at the 2022 midterms. I look back even at previous elections and also elections between the 2022 midterms and today that tell us that sometimes these high-level polls aren't super accurate. But I think what has been pretty consistent and what, came at a time where Donald Trump had a 3, 4, 5-point lead on the national average was that the polls at one point in time were relentlessly Trump. There were very, very few polls that had ever shown Biden in the advantage, and, they often were seen as outliers. But more recently, we've seen a lot more. In the past average of around 10 to 15 polls here, Biden is leading in almost half of them, and there's a tie in a significant number of them. And so when you see ones like this from Emerson College, which historically has been a very accurate pollster, showing Biden ahead by 2, Marquette University, which is also up, Biden +4, Quinnipiac University has Biden up by 3, Marist also has Biden up by 2, Morning Consult, Biden +2, Harvard-Harris is a tie. I'd caution away from using that as a mainstream polling firm at this point, but YouGov has Biden up by 2. And so while I'm not here to say that Biden is now, trouncing Trump in the national average, I don't believe that at all. I do believe it is very much a very close race. But I think this idea and this narrative that has been continued, if you were to strictly look at the Real Clear Politics average, I think is false. Because the lead of Trump today should not be the same lead he had weeks ago when there were significantly less polls showing Biden in the advantage. And I think a big reason for that is because you see polls like Rasmussen Reports, which has Trump up by 8, which skews the average quite significantly, if you ask me. I do believe, though, that Donald Trump is in a much better position than where he was 4 years ago, than where he was 8 years ago. But that isn't to say that there haven't been improvements for President Biden, and I think these improvements matter a lot more because as we get closer to this general election season, voters are becoming more aware. The reason why I think we've seen Biden have these improvements is because of this idea that voters almost always revert to their priors. What that essentially means is that they always revert back to how they voted in a presidential election prior to this one, especially if the candidates are the same. For instance, in Pennsylvania, We've seen this state as one that really hasn't been impacted by President Biden's stance on the war in the Middle East, President Biden's stance on the southern border, on immigration. Pennsylvania has been pretty stagnantly blue over the past couple of weeks. In fact, past couple of months. In 2020, Donald Trump was losing to Biden on Election Day by 1.2 in the polls. That's the exact amount he lost by. Now President Trump is also losing in the polls by 0.1. Again, accuracy in Pennsylvania was spot on in 2020, but actually overestimated Republicans significantly back in 2022, by over 5 points to the right of what the state actually did. And the only one to get it right is the same pollster that has Biden up by 2. Very interesting. But not to say that these polls are going to be always accurate. Again, I want to caution away from that. I'm simply pointing out that there are instances in which the polls are right, and in many cases that they are, you do find that they, can be applauded for that, right? You do find that Marist College, for getting Fetterman up by 6 and he won by 5 as the only poll that had Fetterman ahead, that certainly deserves recognition. Another poll that I think is quite interesting that also had Fetterman ahead that we really don't talk about much because they released their poll a little bit earlier on. But we can see that in the state of Pennsylvania, Franklin and Marshall, a very local and, pretty much just contained polling firm within the state, had Fetterman up by 4. Again, he won by 5. The reason I point that out, they just released a poll showing Biden ahead by 10 points ahead of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. Certainly, something is happening in this state. We'll unpack Pennsylvania a little bit more in a future video, but I think what my focus on is the national average and some of these statewide polls. In Pennsylvania, the reason why I said also, too, that it's been pretty stagnantly blue is because you haven't really seen Biden gain in the past 45 days. That's because a lot of voters here have been reverting to their priors. They've been going back to how they voted in 2020, and we have seen very little shifting. But a state that we have seen major shifting in is a state like Georgia, where Biden has gained 3.4% over the past 45 days. Even states you might not expect to be on this map here gain significantly for Biden here. A 9.8% advantage gain in the state of Maine. That matters. Now, in some states, it's not as big, right? For instance, in states like Nevada, we have seen Biden gain marginally, 0.7%. But of course, that matters in races where they are narrowly decided. In states like Arizona, Biden has made subtle gains here, but nothing super significant. But at the end of the day, that isn't to say that these leads are insurmountable on any margin, right? Biden's lead in Pennsylvania is certainly not insurmountable, and Trump's lead in Wisconsin is certainly not either. The problem lies in the fact that this race is so exceptionally close, which is why these trends, if they are moving the leftward direction, which it seems like they are in almost every single swing state, it matters. Because it means that if these trends continue, which we do find in national politics sometimes is the case, that trend will lead to a Biden victory in the popular vote and likely a Biden victory in the election. I was much more willing to say that Donald Trump would have easily won the presidential election a month ago. I no longer think that is the case. I do believe that the election would go to Donald Trump if held today. I want to reiterate that. But do I think that Biden has no chance? Absolutely not. And to be fair, I never did. But I certainly thought his chances were slimmer than 33% a month ago. I certainly thought his chances were slimmer than 40% a month ago. And now I'd say it's a coin toss. Donald Trump has the narrow advantage, but a map like this one isn't too far out of reality and actually isn't too far out of line with a national popular vote going to Donald Trump. The state of Nebraska, we'll talk about this too, probably tomorrow or later today. The Republicans tried to take this second congressional district because a map like this has been circulating amongst Republican circles. Because this map here, this 270 to 268 victory, one that I think would really drive this country into chaos, being completely honest, just because of how exceptionally close it would be and the scrutiny that would be on these states, on these battleground states, right? I think looking at this map, though, the reason why we've seen Nebraska now, the Republican legislature the governor there tried to take the second district and move it back into Nebraska at large. It failed, by the way, because it's a huge economic, resource for Omaha, a huge reason there's a national spotlight on Nebraska. They pretty much lose all political relevancy once Nebraska second gets absorbed back into Nebraska. So it failed tremendously across the state Senate. That's not my point, though. The point here is not to talk about Republican legislatures. It's to talk about why they did it. It's to talk about a map like this one, which Donald Trump and his surrogates know is a very real possibility. And these trends here aren't a good sign. The problem lies in the fact that President Biden can make up ground, right? Donald Trump has a base and equally a ceiling. One thing has been consistent, though. In all of Donald Trump's leads, he has never cracked 50%. He has never cracked 50%. Looking back at 2020, when we look at this data, Did he ever crack 50%? Well, clearly not, because Biden was doing it constantly and always. In 2016, when he took the lead over Hillary Clinton, did he crack 50%? The answer was no. The problem for Donald Trump is that his ceiling sometimes is enough. Like it was in 2016, when he won by a plurality in these 3 swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that had they gone to Hillary Clinton, she would have won the election. His baseline was equally his ceiling. And so that was enough in 2016. It was not enough in 2020. And the question for 2024 is it enough for him now? Well, considering that Biden is losing a lot of support from 2020 to third-party candidates like RFK Jr., Jill Stein, Cornel West, those candidates, and also, too, a lack of enthusiasm from the left means that there isn't as much outright support for President Biden. Voters in these polls that are for Trump are so enthusiastically for Trump. The same cannot be said for Biden. While that may be a good or bad thing, obviously right now it's a bad thing, it also means that there are probably some hidden Biden voters out there. Hidden Biden voters that are revealed in swing states but not on the national level. That voters from states like California and New York might simply be saying, I'm not voting in this election, or I'm genuinely undecided, but in reality lean left. In reality are going to vote for Biden, and that was never going to be a question. They have disagreements with him on policy points now, but they certainly aren't going to abstain from the election. Or are they? And so that's a question that the Trump campaign, the Biden campaign need to figure out. But one thing is clear. If Biden's performance is better in swing states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, something is severely off with the generic ballot polling, with the general election data that we're dealing with. The reason why I think these shifts on the national level matter so much is because I think they are starting to be reflected by the nature of this race. They are going to be shifted by the fact that Democrats and Republicans are now realizing that this is a Trump v. Biden race, a thing that voters in swing states have for a far time realized. And that isn't to say that voters care, right? In Arizona, Donald Trump is up by 5. In Georgia, Donald Trump is up by 4. He's in the advantage in many of these states. But I will say, swing state voters know this election the best so far. They've been visited the most. They've been advertised at the most. They've been canvassed the most. The resources are pouring into 7 key and crucial battleground states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. That's it. That's the whole ballgame, folks. When you look at these 93 toss-up electoral votes here, you are going to see hundreds of $millions across these states. Hundreds of millions of dollars across 7 states. That amount for less than a fifth of this entire electoral map, but will matter for 100% of it. And so when we see these shifts in these states, we can actually take a look. In Nevada, you actually don't see too much good news for Biden here, an advantage of 0.7. In Arizona, this is where it's a little bit fine, 0.4, but, major improvements need to be made. In Georgia, they happen, right? And, a 3.4% advantage. In Michigan, we've seen Biden gain around 1 point, so that's, fine. In Pennsylvania, pretty stagnantly blue, but still a blue state. In Wisconsin here, we actually seen Biden gain very, very little. Look at that, 0.1%. I didn't even think it was worth mentioning, but I'm going to show you since I talked about the states. The last day here in North Carolina, we've seen Biden gain 1.5%. So in the 7 key and crucial battleground states, we have seen improvements for Biden in all of them. Are they major improvements? In some, yes. In some, no. And that's fine. The problem, though, for Trump is that there has been an improvement. And that 45 more days, and 45 more days, and 45 more days might be enough. Continuous, constant, always be enough to bring Biden in the advantage in these battleground states, bring Biden to victory in these battleground states, and it seems to be matching what we've been seeing on the national shift and overall in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So I'm very interested to see these trends as they continue, because right now they are very, very good news for Biden. There's really no other way to cut it. While there certainly is a reality of it, that these states were never going to be Trump plus 5, Trump plus 4, and that they were always going to narrow down. The narrowing is beginning now, and improvements can be made. Because let's say these polls had sustained themselves through September and October, the only thing the Biden campaign could do was narrow and not win. But this early on, it gives them a prime and very, very strong opportunity at winning in these battleground states, and the trends so far are moving in the right direction. And so they need to keep their eye really on the end game here. They need to see what they're doing right and wrong in these states compared to last time, compared to Hillary Clinton's performance. Overall, these shifts in the polls tell us a story, a very interesting one and one that matters a lot for the future of this nation and the future of both political parties. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.